When I found out what my son had been hiding from me, I didn't shout. I didn't even cry. I just stood there, holding the paper in my shaking hands, wondering when exactly I stopped being his mother and became his fool. This is a story about trust, love, and the kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you'd give your last dollar for. And before I tell you everything that happened, please listen till the end. Because you won't believe what I found at the end of this story. No one ever told me this kind of truth before, but it changed me. And maybe it can change you too, so stay with me. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe, like, and share my channel. It really helps me keep telling stories that remind us love isn't always what it seems. My name's Margaret, though everyone in our little town just calls me Maggie. I've lived in Cedar Valley, a small town tucked between endless green fields and one stubborn main street that never seems to change. There's the bakery that still smells like cinnamon every morning, the church bell that rings every Sunday, and the same cracked sidewalk outside the grocery store that's been there since I was a kid. I've worked at that grocery store for almost 15 years now, part-time, stocking shelves and handling the register. It's not much, but it's honest work. And I've always told my son, honesty will never make you rich, but it'll help you sleep at night. I used to believe that, until I found out what honesty really costs. My son Daniel is 32. He's handsome in that quiet, boyish way that makes mothers think their children never really grow up. He used to help me with everything, mowing the lawn, fixing the porch light, even cooking sometimes when I got too tired after work. But lately, things had been different. He'd lost his job a few months back, something about layoffs at the car parts warehouse. He told me not to worry, that he was sending out applications, doing interviews, waiting to hear back. I believed him, because I'm his mother, and when he said he was short on rent or that the power bill was overdue, I didn't even think twice. I dipped into my small savings, the one I'd built slowly from years of double shifts and grocery discounts, and I helped him. "Mom," he'd say, hugging me tight, "I promise I'll pay you back soon." I'd smile. "Sweetheart, you just focus on getting back on your feet. That's what matters." He always smiled in return, but there was something behind his eyes I couldn't quite name. Not guilt, not fear, maybe just distance. Our lives fell into a rhythm. Every Friday I'd drive out to his apartment, a small, cluttered place on the edge of town with a few groceries, maybe a casserole, and a bit of money folded into an envelope. Sometimes he'd invite me in, sometimes he'd meet me at the door saying, "Thanks, Mom, but I've got friends coming over soon." And every time I told myself not to take it personally. He's an adult now, I thought. He just needs space. Still, I couldn't help noticing small things. A new watch on his wrist one week, a new jacket another. Once, a faint smell of expensive cologne that didn't quite fit the struggling son picture I had in my head. But every time I asked, he had an answer ready. "Oh, this? It was a gift, Mom." Or, "Got it secondhand. You know I'm good at deals." I wanted to believe him, because that's what mothers do. Every other Sunday, Daniel came home for dinner, just the two of us. I'd make pot roast, his favorite, and we'd talk about everything, or at least I did. He'd mostly listen, nodding, smiling politely between forkfuls. Sometimes when I mentioned how tight things had been at the store, he'd grow quiet. Once I said jokingly, "I guess I'll need you to start taking care of me soon." He looked up, and for a split second, his expression changed. It wasn't anger exactly, more like discomfort. Then he smiled again quickly. "Of course, Mom," he said softly. "Of course." But the warmth in his eyes didn't quite reach me. That was the first night I couldn't sleep, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, a notice from the bank. It wasn't addressed to me, but to Daniel Parker, my son. It must have been delivered to my house by mistake. After all, he used to live here before getting his own place. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with a crisp blue logo on the corner. At first I thought it was just another overdue notice or a statement about his loans. But when I flipped it over, I noticed something strange. It wasn't from his usual bank. It was from a bank I'd never even heard of before. I stood there at the kitchen counter, turning the envelope in my hands. The paper felt heavy, expensive. My name wasn't on it, so I knew I shouldn't open it. But my heart, it wouldn't stop whispering. What if he's in trouble again? I told myself I was doing it out of love, so I carefully tore it open. And what I saw inside didn't make sense. There wasn't a bill. There wasn't a notice. It was a statement, a balance sheet, and the number on it made my breath stop cold. Daniel had over $50,000 sitting in that account. I remember staring at it, my mind racing. There had to be a mistake. Maybe it wasn't his Daniel Parker. Maybe it was some business thing or a mix-up. But the address matched. The account number matched. The signature, his signature, matched. All those months I'd been helping him, paying his bills, buying groceries, cutting back on my own medication refills to spare a few dollars. He'd been hiding money. Real money. And suddenly all those little details, the new watch, the jacket, the cologne, they clicked into place like cruel puzzle pieces. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I just sat at my table, staring at the paper, feeling like the world had tilted under me. How do you tell yourself your child lied to you? How do you swallow that kind of truth? The next morning, I folded the letter back into its envelope and decided I needed to look him in the eye before I believed it. That morning, I couldn't even look at my breakfast. The eggs went cold on the plate. The coffee tasted like metal in my mouth. All I could see was that number, $50,000, printed in perfect black ink. I'd given him everything I could, and he'd given me lies. Still, I needed to hear it from him, because some part of me, the mother part, refused to believe my son could deceive me that way. So I called him. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" His voice sounded light, casual, too casual. "Daniel," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need to see you." There was a pause, just long enough to feel it. Sure. Is everything all right? Just come by after work. We need to talk." I could almost hear him frown through the phone. "Yeah, okay, Mom. I'll be there." When I hung up, I just sat there for a moment, hands shaking slightly, heart racing in my chest. I'd never been afraid to talk to my son before, but that morning I realized something painful. When trust breaks, love starts to tremble too. He arrived just before sunset. The golden light hit his car as he pulled into the driveway, the same old blue sedan I'd helped him buy years ago. He came inside all smiles. "Hey, Mom, smells like pot roast, my favorite." I didn't smile back. "Sit down, Daniel." He froze for a second, then he laughed nervously. "Uh-oh, that sounds serious." I placed the envelope on the table, the one I'd been staring at all day. He looked at it, then at me. "What's that?" "You tell me." He reached for it slowly, his fingers brushing the paper. When he saw the bank logo, I watched his face change. Just barely, but enough. His throat tightened. He swallowed hard. "Mom," he said quietly, "where did you get this?" "It came in the mail. I replied. I leaned forward. Do you want to explain why you have $50,000 hidden in a bank account while I've been paying your rent and bills for months? He didn't answer. He just stared at me, eyes darting to the floor, then back up again. Mom, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He rubbed his hands over his face, sighed. I didn't want you to worry. Worry, I repeated. Daniel, I've been feeding you, paying your bills, skipping my own medicine so you wouldn't lose your apartment, and you didn't want me to worry? He shook his head. It's not like that, Mom. I was saving that money for something important. For what? He hesitated again, and then the lie, or maybe the truth, just twisted enough, came tumbling out. I'm trying to start a business, he said. A friend and I, we're working on something big. I didn't want to tell you until it was real. I stared at him, my jaw tight. Then why didn't you stop taking my money? He flinched. I didn't know how to tell you no. That line, I didn't know how to tell you no, hit me like a slap, because it wasn't guilt I heard in his voice. It was embarrassment. He wasn't sorry for lying. He was sorry for getting caught. You let me think you were broke, I said slowly. You let me believe you needed me, all while you were sitting on $50,000. Mom, no, I interrupted, standing up. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Do you know what it feels like to choose between my heart medicine and your rent? He stared at me, stunned. For once, he didn't have a clever answer. Finally, he whispered, I didn't mean to hurt you. I turned away, looking out the window, the yard bathed in fading sunlight. I think you did, I said quietly. You just didn't care enough to stop. He didn't stay for dinner that night. He tried to say goodbye, but I couldn't even look at him. When the door closed, the house felt heavier than it ever had before. That was the first time in my life I felt truly alone. Not because my son was gone, but because I realized the boy I raised wasn't the man standing in my doorway anymore. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The refrigerator hummed softly in the kitchen. The clock ticked on the wall, every second louder than the last. I thought about every dollar, every casserole, every worried night I'd spent praying he'd be okay. And then I thought about that balance sheet, those zeros that meant nothing to him but everything to me. I kept asking myself, why would he do that? What could he possibly need to hide from his own mother? And by morning, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about money. There was something else, something deeper. I could feel it, the way a mother feels the storm before it hits. So I decided to find out the truth myself. I wasn't just going to sit back and wonder anymore. If my son was lying to me, I was going to uncover every piece of that lie, even if it hurt, because I'd rather face the truth than live in a comfortable illusion. What I found next wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal, the kind that leaves scars you can't see. It happened on a Sunday morning, the kind of quiet morning that makes you want to stay in bed a little longer, just listening to the wind move through the curtains. I was cleaning the kitchen, humming a tune my mother used to hum, when I noticed Daniel's jacket draped over the chair. He'd been here the night before, said he was dropping by to check on me. That jacket. Something about it made me stop. Inside the pocket, my fingers brushed against paper, folded neatly, crisp. I thought maybe it was a receipt, maybe something he'd want back. But when I opened it, my heart stopped. It was a bank statement. His name was right there. And the balance. It wasn't small. It was over $40,000. $40,000. While I'd been wiring him money every month, skipping my own groceries, praying he'd find a way to get by, he had a secret account. I remember just standing there, my hands trembling. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion. Why would he hide something like this from me? Was I really that easy to fool? I sat down at the table, the paper in my hands crinkling like dry leaves. Memories started flashing. Him saying, "Mom, I'm behind on rent." Mom, I need gas money. Mom, can you please help me out this month? Each word, once soaked in love, now felt like a lie. I felt small, used, like the sacrifices I'd made, selling jewelry, delaying repairs, skipping doctor visits, meant nothing. But then, another thought hit me. What if it wasn't just the money? What if there was something deeper he was hiding? I needed answers, so I waited until Monday morning when the bank opened. I told myself it was probably a mistake, maybe a joint account, maybe even something set up by his employer. I wanted to believe that. Because the alternative, that my son had been lying to me, was too heavy to bear. When the teller confirmed the account belonged solely to Daniel, something inside me went cold. No shared names, no misunderstanding, just my son and his secret. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick. Each second felt like a question I didn't want answered. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him in anger. I wanted the truth, calmly, clearly, in his own words. So I called him. My voice was steady when I said, "Daniel, sweetheart, can you come over tonight? I made your favorite roast." He laughed softly, said he'd be there. He had no idea. That evening when he walked in, smiling, hungry, the same boy who once used to leave little notes on my fridge, I almost forgot the paper in my drawer. Almost. We sat down, ate together. I listened to him talk about his week, about a new car one of his friends bought. And then I asked, gently, "Daniel, honey, do you have another bank account?" His fork froze halfway to his mouth. A flicker, just a moment of panic in his eyes. Then came the lie. "No, Mom, why would you think that?" I reached for the drawer beside me, pulled out the paper, placed it between us. The silence that followed felt like thunder in a small room. He didn't say a word, didn't move, just stared at it. Finally, he whispered, "You went through my things?" I wanted to laugh. Of all the things he could have said, that was what he chose? "Daniel," I said quietly, "I went through your jacket, yes, but you went through my heart for months." His face crumpled, a mix of guilt and defiance. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I just didn't know how." "Didn't know how?" I asked. "You knew how to ask for rent money, how to call me when your account was low, how to let me believe you were struggling." He opened his mouth, then shut it, and for a moment he looked like a little boy again, caught, scared, ashamed. But when he finally spoke, what he said broke me even more. "I didn't want your help anymore," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how to say no without hurting you." That line, it's strange. It almost sounded caring, but it wasn't. It was selfish. Because while he was trying not to hurt me, he let me bleed slowly, with every lie. I remember standing up, pushing my chair back. I said, "You didn't have to lie, Daniel. You just had to be honest. That's all I ever asked." He didn't follow me when I walked away. He just sat there, staring at the statement. That night, I closed my bedroom door and locked it for the first time in years. And as I sat there in the dark, I whispered to myself, my son isn't who I thought he was. And that was the beginning of something I wasn't ready for. The morning after that dinner, the house felt empty. It's strange. He'd only been gone for a few hours, but the air still carried his voice, the scrape of his chair, the way he said, "Thanks, Mom," before leaving. Hollow, polite, and so far from the boy I'd raised. I didn't know what to do with the silence, so I cleaned the dishes, the counters, the floor, anything to fill the ache that had settled in my chest. But no matter how much I scrubbed, I couldn't wipe away that image of his eyes, full of excuses and unfinished truths. I thought about calling him, about telling him I forgave him, just to ease the weight between us. But forgiveness, I realized, doesn't come when the wound is still open. It comes when you finally stop pretending it didn't cut deep. So I stayed quiet. For 3 days, I didn't call, didn't text, and he didn't either. Then one afternoon, my sister Claire stopped by. She took one look at me and said, "You've been crying, haven't you?" I laughed, tried to shake it off, but Claire's never been one to let things slide. So I told her everything, the bank account, the lies, the confrontation. When I finished, she leaned back and said something I wasn't ready to hear. "Maybe he's not the only one to blame." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" Claire folded her arms. "You've been taking care of him since he was a teenager, sis. You never stopped. Maybe he didn't know how to be honest because he never had to be." That stung, because deep down, I knew she was right. I'd made it too easy for him. Every time he stumbled, I caught him before he hit the ground. Every time he asked for help, I said yes, because I thought love meant saying yes. That night, I went through my old notebooks, the ones where I used to write family budgets, grocery lists, and bills. There, between those faded pages, were years of proof, my sacrifices, my just one more month payments, my late fees so he could have what he needed. But something shifted inside me. For the first time, I didn't feel proud. I felt foolish. The next day, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went to the bank, not to check on Daniel this time, but to check on myself. I sat with a young woman named Alicia, kind eyes, patient smile. She helped me set up a new account, one Daniel didn't know about, my own savings, my own start. When she handed me the papers, I felt something lift. It wasn't just financial, it was emotional, like I'd finally taken a piece of my power back. That evening, I got a message from Daniel, just 5 words. "Can I come by tomorrow?" My heart sank, part fear, part hope. I texted back, "Yes, but let's talk honestly this time." He showed up the next day, holding a small box. His eyes looked tired, older somehow, like he'd been carrying guilt too heavy for too long. He set the box on the table. "It's for you," he said quietly. "Open it." Inside was an envelope and the letter. In it, he'd written that the secret account wasn't from gambling or something illegal. It was from a small online business he'd started, selling refurbished electronics. He said he wanted to surprise me one day, pay me back for everything I'd done, but somewhere along the way, he got lost in the lie. He wrote, "Every time I lied, it got harder to tell the truth. And by the time I wanted to come clean, I didn't know how to face you." I didn't know whether to cry or to scream because the truth, while softer than betrayal, still carried the same ache. I folded the letter and said quietly, "Daniel, I don't need your money. I needed your honesty." He nodded, tears filling his eyes, and for the first time in months, maybe years, he looked like my son again, vulnerable, human, sorry. We sat in silence for a long time, no shouting, no anger. Just the quiet sound of 2 people trying to rebuild something fragile. Trust. Then I said, "Daniel, you have to understand something. Love isn't about saving someone from consequences. It's about teaching them how to stand levelly." He nodded again, and this time he reached for my hand. That small gesture. There wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. A few weeks passed after that conversation with Daniel. The air between us was still cautious, like walking on thin ice, but there was something new, too. A willingness to face the truth, no matter how much it hurts. He started visiting again, helping me with errands, fixing things around the house. We didn't talk about money anymore, not at first. Instead, we talked about simple things, the weather, the garden, what to make for dinner. And little by little, the silence that had once been heavy began to feel peaceful. Then, one Sunday morning, Claire called me. She said she'd seen Daniel at the community center, volunteering of all things. Apparently, he was helping out with a local workshop, teaching teenagers about saving and budgeting. I almost laughed when she told me, not because it was funny, but because of the irony. My son, the one who'd hidden money from his mother, was teaching others how to handle theirs. But as the days went on, I realized, maybe this was his way of making things right. A few weeks later, he invited me to that same community event. He said, "Mom, I'd really like you to come. It would mean a lot." I hesitated, part of me still wary, but I went. When I arrived, the room was filled with young people, all listening to him speak. He wasn't flashy or rehearsed. He spoke with the kind of honesty I hadn't heard from him in years. He said, "When I was younger, I thought hiding my mistakes made me look stronger. But I learned that the people who love you don't want perfection. They just want the truth." My eyes burned as he said those words, because I knew who he was really speaking to. After his talk, people came up to shake his hand, to thank him. And for the first time, I didn't see my son as a boy I needed to rescue. I saw him as a man, flawed, humbled, but trying. Later, when we got home, he handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a check, not from his secret account, but from his new business. He said, "I've been saving this to pay you back. But I want you to use it for something you've always wanted, Mom. Not bills. Something for you." I stared at that check for a long time. Then I tore it in half. He looked shocked. "Mom, why would you do that?" I smiled gently and said, "Because I don't want repayment, Daniel. I want change. And I already see it." He didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug, the kind of hug that said what words couldn't. "Thank you. I'm sorry. I love you." That moment, right there, was worth more than any amount of money. Word about Daniel's workshop spread through town. People began talking, in the grocery store, the coffee shop, even church, and not in the way gossip usually sounds. They were proud of him. "He's really turning things around," one neighbor said to me. "He's helping the kids stay out of debt before they even start." Hearing that, I felt something deep inside me begin to heal, because maybe our pain wasn't wasted after all. Maybe it had become something useful, something that could help others. You know, people often think justice comes from punishment, but sometimes it comes from transformation, from watching someone grow into the person you always hoped they become. That night, Daniel texted me again, just a simple message. "Thanks for not giving up on me." And this time, instead of replying with words, I just sent a little heart emoji. It was small, but it meant everything. That's the thing about family. They can break your heart, but sometimes they're also the ones who teach you how to heal it. It's strange how life has a way of quieting after a storm. For months, my house had felt like a battlefield, tension in every corner, silence sharper than any word. But now, there was peace. Not perfect peace, but the kind that feels earned, like a breath after crying too long. Daniel started stopping by on weekends again. He'd bring groceries or sometimes just coffee, and we'd sit on a porch watching the world go by. He didn't try to impress me anymore. He didn't hide behind pride or excuses. He just showed up, himself, and maybe that's all I ever wanted. One evening, as the sun was setting, he said, "Mom, do you ever wish you'd done things differently? You know, when I was growing up?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw not the boy who lied to me, but the man who was finally asking to be understood. I said, "Of course I do. But wishing doesn't change the past. What matters is what we do with what's left." He nodded, quiet. Then he smiled. A small, real smile that softened everything. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. There's a kind of healing that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand apologies. It just settles in. Like sunlight after rain. That's what happened to us. No big confrontation, no final speech, just small moments, a dinner, a laugh, a long drive, slowly stitching together what had once been torn. I started sleeping better. My mornings were quieter, gentler. I even joined a book club again, and sometimes I'd catch myself smiling at nothing, realizing how far we'd come. Then one day, Daniel said he wanted to show me something. He drove me across town to a little office space, clean, simple, and bright. On the door was a small sign, "Second Chance Financial Coaching." He grinned. "It's mine, Mom." I'm finally doing what I was meant to do. I couldn't stop the tears, because right then I knew the truth. Every sacrifice, Every sleepless night, every broken moment had led to this. And I told him, I'm proud of you. Not because you're successful now, but because you learned. He hugged me tight, whispering, I couldn't have done it without you. And for once, I believed him. You know, when I look back now, I realized this wasn't just a story about money. It was about honesty, about learning that love can't exist where there are secrets, but forgiveness can rebuild what lies destroy. So if you're listening right now, maybe you've been where I was, trusting someone who let you down, giving until you felt empty. I want to tell you something I learned the hard way. You can't control someone's choices, but you can choose how you respond. You can choose to stop living in bitterness and start living in truth. Because forgiveness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And sometimes, letting go of the past is how you finally get your peace back. I hope my story helps you see that, and maybe, just maybe, remind you that the people who break your heart can still surprise you one day. You can't imagine what life brings when you stay kind but firm, strong but soft. That's what healing looks like. You know, sometimes the hardest goodbyes aren't to people. They're to versions of ourselves, the version that kept giving, kept hoping, kept believing that love alone could fix everything. But maybe growing up, even as a mother, means learning to love without losing yourself, to give without going broke inside, to forgive without forgetting what you deserve. When I found that secret bank account, I thought the world was ending. But now I see it was just beginning. Because sometimes truth doesn't destroy us, it frees us. If my story touched you today, if it reminded you of something you've lived through, please don't keep it inside. Tell me your story below. Your words might be the light someone else needs tonight. And if you felt something real here, please subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow, but more than that, it reminds me that these stories still matter, that you still believe in truth, healing, and the kind of love that rebuilds after breaking. Until next time, take care of your heart, be kind to your truth, and remember, sometimes the people who hurt you the most are also the ones who teach you who you are. Thank you for listening to my story. Which moment stayed with you? Which part did you feel in your chest? Tell me below. I read every comment. And if this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support keeps these voices alive and helps stories like mine find the people who need them most. I'll see you soon with another true story. This is True Heart Voices, and this was my story.